The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hi there, and welcome from Studio 27 in Sacramento, California, and to our other panelists across the U.S. and the rest of the world to today's webinar, a case study, how Mercury Marine reduces cost and introduces products faster by streamlining engineering change and part reuse. It's sponsored by Siemens PLM Software and hosted by Desktop Engineering Magazine, the knowledge leader that design engineers rely upon to succeed in global manufacturing, and WebAttract, your end-to-end solution provider for informational webinars. Hi, my name is Mike Agron. I'm the executive webinar producer for WebAttract, and I'll be one of your hosts for today's session. And in just a moment, I'm going to introduce your moderator, Ken Wong of Desktop Engineering, to get our case study discussion underway with our experts from Mercury Marine. We want to also let you know that you'll have an opportunity to have your questions answered at the end of our panel discussion during the Ask the Experts panel session with all of the panelists, and I'll tell you how to do that in just a moment. We're extremely excited to have a global audience. We've got over 325 professionals registered from 13 countries, 33 states and provinces, and here's the industries that you represent, with automotive and transportation being at the top. What we've done today is invite you with other engineering, design, CAD managers, product managers, IT and manufacturing professionals to hear firsthand from John Bayless and Nat Workman of Mercury Marine, where they're going to discuss how they've used Siemens PLM Software Team Center and use that to monitor, change, and ensure that its business divisions are working on a single source of product data. It's quite a good presentation, having listened to it earlier this week. In fact, what we've done is design today's webinar to provide you in the audience with ample opportunity to ask our panel of experts that Ken Wong will be leading how they were able to transform homegrown engineering change management systems into a single global engineering change system, how they were able to improve productivity by increasing parts reuse, as well as, how did they save time and money by accelerating new product introductions. But we believe, regardless of your industry role, segment, we're confident you're going to find today's webinar to be of value. So with the housekeeping out of the way, it is absolutely my pleasure to bring on and introduce Ken Wong, who is the contributing editor of Desktop Engineering. For those of you who read Desktop Engineering, you're probably familiar with Ken, but if you're not, he's been a regular contributor to the CAD industry press since about 2000. He started out as an editor. Later, he was a columnist and freelance writer for various pubs. And during his tenure, he's closely followed the migration from 2D to 3D, particularly around the growth of product lifecycle management and the impact of globalization on manufacturing. He's also Desktop Engineering's resident blogger. Ken, welcome to the webinar. I'm now going to turn this portion over to you and looking forward to the rest of the discussion.
Hey, Mike, thank you very much, and thanks for the warm welcome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you are joining us for the very first time, glad to have you on board. Welcome. And if you happen to be returning because you attended our previous webinar last October on how PLM propels innovation at Mercury Marine, welcome back. Either way, along with my co-presenters, we'll make sure that your time is worthwhile. A lot of the times data management problems stem from the fact that people who are using them have to juggle too many different systems and not being able to rely on them to be able to synchronize the files among themselves in the background while you're working. So it's one of the major headaches that we'll be discussing and talking about with the experts that will be coming on soon. Before we do that, I just want to have a good sense of how your own experience is in dealing with those file management systems and data management. I'm going to ask Mike. Mike, can you help me do a poll here?
Let me bring it up. Folks, in just a moment, I'm going to launch the first of two polls we have, and it should be appearing on your desktop. And if you would be kind enough just to choose one of these options, which is answering how many different data management and project management systems do you work with on a daily basis? Is it 3 or less? Is it 4 to 10 or more than 10? Any comments on this before I do share the results while people are voting?
Well, I'd be interested to know because my personal feeling is that anytime you have to juggle more than three, you run the risk of grabbing the wrong file while you're working on it because you can never be so sure that somebody else is not working on it while you are doing something on it.
Good point. Well, it looks like everybody who's voted has voted. I thank you for that. And Ken, as you can see, 70% have said 3 or less, 29% said 4 to 10, and 0% on 1% more than 10. Any comments on this?
Well, I'm glad to see that actually there's very few people who are using more than 10 because that'll be just courting disaster. 4 to 10, it's manageable if you have good workflow and good policies in place. 3 to less, I think, is the ideal as it'll be reinforced by our experts. Yeah, I think it is now time to meet our experts. Our first panelist is John Bayliss. He's the Director of PLM Practices at Mercury Marine. John, would you mind saying a few words about who you are and what your specific role is in the company?
Yes, my role in the company includes the following responsibilities. I manage Mercury's 10-year product plan, Mercury's program office, that is our group of new product development and program managers, as well as Mercury PLM Services. As such, I've had the privilege of leading the first program to make full use of Mercury's PLM implementation, and more recently, leading the team of 14 talented PLM professionals like Nat, who made the PLM implementation at Mercury possible.
Okay, so it is now time to bring on also your colleague Nat. Nat Workman, as his last name suggests, works very hard as the PLM project lead for Mercury Marine. Nat, say something about what you do there at PLM Marine.
Sure. Hi, I'm the PLM project lead, which basically means I help run projects. I gather business requirements, facilitate processes, and then bring that information back in document form back to the technical experts who are able to configure the system. Then I help drive the project beyond that. Prior to joining the PLM team, my previous experience at Mercury was in the manufacturing side. I was developing and installing manufacturing MES systems and some other systems for the plant usage.
So, Nat, actually, John, let's start with you. Can you set the stage for us, if you will? Talk about who Mercury Marine is and what its product lines are.
Yes. Since the company was founded in 1939, Mercury Marine has offered a full line of marine engine products and their associated accessories. Today, Mercury Marine's product line covers the range from 2.5 horsepower to over 1,000 horsepower. To transmit that power to the water, the engines are integrated with outdrives to make outboard, inboard, stern drive, and the new pod configuration products. Associated with the marine power products are accessories such as engine controls and rigging devices like digital throttle and shift, SmartCraft digital gauges, and a full line of propellers. Thus, Mercury's product development processes and PLM systems have to support a broad range of technologies and engineering disciplines such as mechanical, electrical, software, and controls engineering for diverse markets ranging from the ultra-price sensitive fishing markets where we have people using our products in remote regions to all-out world-class racing. These products are engineered and manufactured by Mercury Marine in locations all around the world, including USA, China, and Mexico.
Hey, thank you very much, John. Now, what were some of your challenges as the company? And I want to ask you also why Mercury Marine feel the need to simplify its change management process. Let's start with that.
Well, historically, the marine engine customers have preferred two-stroke engine technology, especially in their outboards, because of two-stroke technology's inherent lightweight, high torque, and overall simplicity. And that was really Mercury Marine's strength. However, approximately 10 years ago, customer preference shifted from two-stroke technology to four-stroke engine technology. And this is the technology that we're all maybe more familiar with because it's what you'll find in your car, your truck, your motorcycle, or even your lawnmower. But to maintain the market leadership position, Mercury had to adapt to the technology trend and do so very quickly. Thus, the company initiated a number of new product development programs focused on four-stroke engine technology, as well as the Product Lifecycle Management Initiative to create the capability to complete the new programs in the time available. Two aspects of the product development process under review were change management and part reuse. Change management and part reuse were thought to be critical because of the complexity involved. The complexity at Mercury can be characterized by a process that's operated by over 1,200 users and 10 facilities spread across 3 different countries. But Nat, you were part of the Mercury team that took on the change management assignment. Could you describe Mercury Marine's approach to overhauling the change management process?
Sure. Basically, the first thing we did is we look at the process, because one of the key things was we had to consolidate from 3 systems down to just the one. And so we asked a cross-functional team of business process owners to work together and come up with a solution for that. And basically, we looked at it at a high level, and there's 4 critical components to that. One is initiating a change, second is authorizing, third is executing the change, and then the final is doing the change of validation. And so one of the components to helping with that is establishing what we call the change board, which is cross-functional, it's cross-product, and it's cross-plant. And basically the change board represents that authorization portion of this particular change process. And John can go in a little bit on what his experiences are with that.
As a program manager, I've led my change boards through some routine changes and some controversial changes. And one thing about the routine changes is it establishes a good habit pattern for the team and a good understanding of the process for when the controversial changes come through. For example, I had an engineer recommend a change on a cowl seal for an outboard engine, and the cowl seal is the component that keeps the water outside of the engine. But the change was made almost seemingly without regard for the capital budget, something near and dear to my heart as a program manager. But luckily, the issue was resolved at the change board right there because the chief engineer suggested an alternative solution that he was familiar with from a previous program. Meanwhile, the manufacturing engineer supported with a lower cost manufacturing option. And in the end, we were able to meet the functional requirement of sealing the cowl correctly and stay within budget. Without the change board, we would not necessarily have had the opportunity to communicate, to collaborate, or the time within the program schedule to find an alternative solution. But now Nat, my example is from a new program product development case. There are others.
Yes. For example, to help manage that change process, the team came up with basically 3 change class types, and there's a class A, a class B, and a class C. The intent of this is basically to help segregate more efficiently when they initiate the change and how things are going to work through the change process. So a class A change represents a new product program. A class B change is anything that affects form, fit, function, and cost. And a class C change is basically anything that's a minor change in the system. Basically, the intent behind this is anything that's a minor drawing change or anything that is related to like a manufacturing recipe change and things like that. We wanted to basically set it up so that the workflow was fairly straightforward. And in the case of the Class B change, we asked the initiator to present their change proposal to the change board, who will then decide how to proceed based on the information provided. Now at this point we can look at some forms. So basically what we have, the form on the left represents the high level change form. And so basically that's anybody initiating a change would see this in front of them, and under the change proposal type they would set up whether it's a class A, B, or C. Based on that choice, the form on the right would change. And so if it's a Class B change affecting cost, for example, the cost impact fields are presented so the user is able to work through what those fields should be, and the change board is able to have information to work from. The different tasks associated with the workflow are also set up on the fly based on what's selected by the user on this particular portion of the form.
Okay, Nat, glad you showed us the form because the intuitiveness of the interface makes a huge difference in change management. Well, let's get some perspective from the trenches, shall we say. How exactly did you implement the change management process that you propose?
Sure. Basically, what we did is we had we trained the users basically using basically a week ahead approach. What we wanted is to get the training done as soon as possible just prior to that go live, which from our perspective was a line in the sand process. And so because we were converting from 3 legacy systems into Team Center, basically what we did is we said, okay, from a point in time forward, all the legacy systems will be shut off and will be a read-only mode. and anything new from a change perspective will be done in the new Team Center system moving forward. And so basically what we did is, from a training standpoint, we had the members of the PLM team go to the different sites and work with the users live where we could. So that way it was, we had face-to-face contact. And then we also came up with training materials. We had quick guides, which were, quick desk references. And then we also had online interactive documents. With that said, the process definition portion of our deployment took about 6 months, with the configuration and go-live portions taking roughly 3 months.
Well, the line in the sand approach, as you call it, I guess, signifies that there is no turning back now. And that's a pretty dramatic thing to do. So I want to know what exactly you did to make sure that everybody feels comfortable with the new system, Team Center, once it goes live.
Sure. One of the keys to our success was we had a cross-functional team that worked together to put the processes together. And so one of the things that we asked them to do is, okay, make this as intuitive as possible, and then they brought that back to us, and then we tried to configure it as much as possible to what they had asked. We tried to make the workflow more intuitive also by reducing the number of steps involved. So basically we took the workflow and knocked it down by roughly 50%, and then the change process itself has gone down roughly 66%, from roughly 56 days down to 22.
What exactly are the kind of improvements that you begin to see on a day-to-day basis once the system goes live?
Well, as I explained before, with the CalSeal example, having a smooth change process for the new programs really helps keep the program under control during the design validation phase. In that regard, the change process has helped us maintain our cost, quality, and timing targets. And on your screen right now, you can see 2 of Mercury's engines, one from the racing division, with a red color, and then one in the foreground is a brand new 8.2-liter stern drive engine that we'll get a chance to discuss a little bit more in part reuse. But because of having a stable change process, the product development process in general helps us stay on track.
Thanks, John. Let me go back to Nat for a minute there. Nat, if you don't mind, can you go into greater details, for instance, about how the core team helped streamline the change management process?
Absolutely. The most important piece of this was their collaboration, and basically what we asked them to do was keep the process simple and intuitive. And what they did is they worked very well together. They wanted to provide an ideal state back to the configuration team, and based on that ideal process state, we then work with them to configure it within the system. We were able to use roughly 95% of what their ideal state would be, and that worked out really well. We tried to make the user interface as easy as possible to understand. That's why it starts with a base form, and then it rolls through, based on your change class type selection, to make it as intuitive as possible. The other thing we try to do is keep in mind customization that would potentially complicate things going forward, and we tried to keep the implementation out of the box as much as we could. The other things we looked at is making sure the process was robust enough to consider, for example, different change types. For example, in drawing sign-off, there's change proposals, and we also have document reviews and things like that. Another key to our success is, as John mentioned earlier, we have a team with a vast background base, and some have an IT background, others Team Center configuration, CAD, process definition, things like that. And so it's very helpful to have a team with a broad talent that take this information from the customer back to and work with them to make things happen.
Okay, so I'm sure that having done this for a while, you begin to develop best practices in how you manage your users. Could you share some of those things that you learned and about user management with us?
Yes, as Nat explained, this is all about cross-functional alignment and communication. Therefore, it's critical for the business to get aligned on roles and responsibilities so that the system can be configured to support people and their work assignments. Some of the considerations include who will initiate change requests, who will authorize changes, who will execute changes, and who can view change information.
Yeah, another consideration is the process enforcement rules and security within the system. For example, an initiator can authorize their own change, as a rule you might want to put in the system. Change form could have fields that are required only under certain conditions, or for example, the different change classes. What would constitute a quorum on the product change board would be another thing to consider. And then from a security standpoint, considering at what point in the process and by whom should change objects be modified.
Okay, I like what you said. The person who initiates the change cannot authorize his own change. It sounds like common sense to me, but I've seen some of those places where this does happen. Good point. All right, John, something else you champion was actually part reuse. I wonder if you can explain to us about why that is important for Mercury Marine to encourage people to use existing parts wherever possible.
Yes, as with change, part reuse was a complicated process at the start, one which, if improved, could save the product development team precious time. Of course, there are other benefits as well. For example, each time we create a new fastener, we add complexity to procurement, complexity to manufacturing, both of their operations. Also, the time spent recreating an existing part for lack of knowledge of that part is time we cannot spend refining an all-new design. Lastly, not having a good handle on how to reuse existing parts limits our ability to create more modular products. And by more modular products, I mean platform strategies where we can have a one platform product and then create derivative products from that using other existing parts. Going back to the picture that we saw on a previous slide, the two engines, one from racing and one from Mercruiser. We launched the new Mercruiser engine, an 8.2-liter inboard stern drive engine, just last year. It's the only catalyzed big block gas stern drive, and we created it in record time. To complete that project, we maximized the use of existing components. To be specific, 76% of the new 8.2-liter engine is made from existing parts. 15% are from its predecessor, an 8.1-liter engine. 60% are from the racing product that you saw with the orange paint. They're mostly built from the same block casting. The benefits were we launched the new engine on time, 5 horsepower above the target, 10 pounds below the weight target, and $100 below the cost target. And you'll take a step back and say, how did all this happen? Why were we successful? Well, part of the reason is because we were focused on the value-added new components, the components that were bespoke to the new 8.2-liter. And really, that was the key to staying on timeline and on budget.
I want to go back to Ned for a minute. Ned, now, if somebody wants to start this same kind of practice, encourage users to reuse part wherever possible, can you give us some suggestions on how a company might go about doing it? How do they get started?
Sure. Basically, what we wound up doing is we looked at all of our common parts and assessed, which ones would be very useful for a proof of concept. The parts had to be something used fairly often by a large group of people, but it couldn't be so many parts that would be really hard to populate. So we used springs as that proof of concept. Basically, what we did is we put in the team center classification, and we worked with a subject matter expert who was able to basically help define which springs were necessary to put into the system. And then we had basically a helper come in and the entry work to make that happen in Team Center. From our perspective, we have 32 part classifications within our engineering world. We have 14 of them in classification now, and we continue to add more classes to the system, for the foreseeable future. One of the critical things, like I said, was the subject matter expert, because they're able to screen the documentation, make sure that the right parts and the right attributes are being loaded in the system. Another consideration is using an unintelligent part number with an attribute for part class rather than an intelligent part number where that class information may be baked into the part. Also, an example of how our change management system works closely with the classification process is we have a handler in our drawing sign-off workflow that helps screen the common parts. We have a subject matter expert who's a stop on the workflow, because one of the things we don't want to happen is, let's say, have a fastener created by an engineer and then brought into the system when we have something similar to it. And so during the drawing sign-off process, that subject matter expert is one of the stops along the way if a part class equals one of these things that's in the classification table. It helps us basically keep the system clean, and this gatekeeper has the final say in whether a new part can be admitted into that classification system.
All right. So, Ned, John, thank you very much for sharing all those things. I learned quite a bit about the insights that you can draw from change management implementation process. Now, beyond what we have just shared, if somebody wants to take home a few key steps, shall we say, in imitating what you have done, do you have any suggestions on what is the next things that they can do?
Well, there's a number of things that, a number of places that people can go for more information. MERCURY PLM Services shares best practices and our experiences with other companies through a variety of ways. For example, we're working with on our own A3 upgrade within Mercury and are deploying A3 for several of our customers. Also, there is quite a bit of general information available on our website. Nat, can you explain?
Yes, yeah. As part of this process, you'll be receiving a link to a Siemens case study with some information about us after this session. And then there's other information is available on our website as well, which is mercuryplm.com. You'll have access to our published documents on a variety of topics, including change management. There's a section under the publications area called From Our Experience, as well as the past presentations from PLM World and other events where we've had speakers. Also, if you're interested in learning more about what we've done at Mercury Marine, you can sign up for our information exchange on April 14th. And both online and on-site attendance registrations are possible.
That's right. We'll also meet with other companies interested in looking at company-specific cases. Mercury PLM Services also participates in SIGs and other industry events such as PLM World this May. If you have any questions or requests for information, please contact us. We would love to hear from you, and we hope to see you at PLM World in Las Vegas. Finally, we hope this has been a good use of your precious time and maybe encourage you to take the next step in your PLM implementation so that you and your company can enjoy the same benefits from PLM we've enjoyed at Mercury Marine. We wish you the very best.
Okay, John, Nat, both, thank you very much. We're just about to start taking questions, and I'm sure the audience have a lot of interesting questions, and usually that is actually the most interactive part and the fun part. But before we do that, now that the audience has had a chance to hear your own experience, I just want to do one quick poll if I can. Mike, can we bring up that question that I have?
You bet, Ken, and you're absolutely right. We got quite a few questions in the queue. So, folks, I'm going to go ahead and launch our second and final poll. And as you did with the last one, in your organization, when you're working on a file, do you feel confident you're using the right file or the right version? And just choose one. Yes, I'm very confident. I'm somewhat confident. No, I'm not confident at all. And if we take a look at our screen, it looks like 46% say I'm very confident, 44% I'm somewhat confident, 10% I'm not confident at all. Ken, any comments on this before we do start the questions, since this is up?
Oh, this is very interesting because it's almost an even split, if you can see, among people who feel that whenever they're working on a file or a CAD file or a bill of material, whatever that might be, that they are absolutely sure that they are using the right one. And then there is about half of the audience feel wishy-washy about it. And, you know, we can speak from our own experience working on the PowerPoint deck for the presentation and so on and so forth, how important it is to actually make sure that we don't end up overriding each other's changes. So it tells me the fact that half of the audience says that they're not that confident tells me that there is a lot of work to be done about encouraging people to think about using as few data management system as they need to so that they don't have to keep juggling and then risk making mistakes, costly mistakes in manufacturing industries. Okay, I think it is time for us to go ahead and start taking questions, and I'm really looking forward to hear what the audience have to ask our panelists.
Well, great. Let's start with the first one. And as we said at the start, we purposely wanted to create as much conversation with you and the audience as possible, and I'm delighted that we have the time available to do that. So here's the first question. Nat, this is for you. It's a two-part question. How many different homegrown systems was Mercury Marine using previously? And there's a part two to this. What was the system consolidation strategy when migrating to Team Center?
Sure. We had 3 legacy systems, and what we did is a line in the sand approach where we said the legacy systems will be used up to a cutoff point, and then they'll become read-only, and all work going forward had to be done using the new system.
Okay, and there's a follow-on to this, Nat. What types of processes were managed?
Oh, sure. Basically, we had Lotus Notes and our legacy mainframe system were the systems that were being shut down. We had 2 databases in Notes and then the one in our mainframe environment. And so the processes on those 3 systems would be the drawing sign-off, the engineering change order, and then the actual product change configuration.
Terrific. Here's a question, another question to add. How many different change processes were in place before you harmonized to one process? Who'd like to take that?
I'll try to take that. Basically, we, like I said, we had the 3 systems, but we had drawing, sign-off, engineering change order, and then just an overall change process. And so what we tried to do was pull all those into one single system, Team Center, in this particular case. And the class A, B, and C helps manage that, as well as there's different, like I said, processes within, this Team Center environment.
Okay. And John, I think this would be for you. Can you tell us why did the company feel the need to consolidate all of these into a single platform? And the second part was there a specific incident in recent history or a project that prompted management to seek a solution? If you need me to repeat all or part of it, just let me know.
Well, let me try to answer the second question first. Specific incidents in recent history, probably the first one was the technology shift and a need to overhaul Mercury's whole product portfolio. That was probably one of the very first specific incidents. However, I have to say that in the economic downturn that we've all experienced over the last few years, it has certainly been a great benefit that we have had a lot of these processes improvements already in place and a way to continuously improve them so that we could keep up with our product launch cadence with probably about 2/3 of the workforce that we had just a decade ago. And then could you repeat the first question?
Yes, sure, certainly. The second part is, was there a specific incident in recent history or project that was kind of a catalyst or prompted management to want to seek a solution?
Right. So with those market shift and things like a potential downturn or needing to be more efficient, and I think that's what it came down to, was making the product development teams more efficient, and when they were working, make their work more accurate by making sure that everybody was working with the correct data.
And looks like, to tag on to that, can you perhaps enumerate or amplify what some of the challenges were?
Sure. I think that in general, some of the challenges is when you have such a diverse organization. We mentioned, 1,200 users, 3 countries, 10 facilities, that just getting everybody aligned on what the process is. We'll start with the process definition, the as is, and then working with the team to define a to be type of process, just the process. Then working with the next level of managers and establishing who has ownership for the process definition. And then finally, the last challenge is coming in with a more traditional, connecting the hardware and the systems in a way that is simple, a way that's intuitive. Some of the examples would be, that last phase would be what Nat showed, with active forms that adapt to the situation as the users define it. So in a sense, process definition, establishing process ownership, and making sure that we have a simple, intuitive interface.
Okay. Someone in the audience wants to know if you can give some insight on how does Team Center help you identify parts for reuse?
Sure, I can start. Basically, the classification tool has a very robust search component, and you can configure what search parameters you want for each of the classified parts in the system. So, for example, a bolt can have different search criteria than a nut or a washer and so on. And so all an engineer would have to do is plug in a range or values within that search criteria, and they're able to get a good feel for what parts we currently have in the system.
Okay. Here's a question on wanting to know what tool are you using for your bill of materials?
Well, we use ProEngineer as our CAD tool, and so all of our design is done in ProE. And then there's we then save the content from ProE into Team Center, and so then Team Center or the product structure editor is used then to manage the bill of material.
I think there's an interesting relationship between that question and the previous question. We have a large assembly management strategy where the engineering bill of materials is structured in a similar way for every project. So we can take an engineering bill of material from a previous project and start from there when we get the team formed for the new project. And because we start with the old bill, it kind of highlights where you might want to look for common parts from a previous product.
Yeah, and it does that philosophy, that large assembly management philosophy, works extremely well for downstream users because from project to project, they'll know where to look for things. And that's been very helpful for creating other systems based on the bill of material.
Okay. Here's one. I hope I can read it correctly. It says, how do you handle non-UG parts? Am I reading it correctly?
Yeah, I think you might be talking about something that used to be known as Unigraphics.
Ah, okay.
Sure, yeah. Like I stated earlier, we use ProEngineer, so there's a tool called IPIM that's the integration piece between the ProE world and Team Center, and so that's how we get the information back and forth between those two tools.
Okay. Maybe you answered this, but here's another question from the audience. What CAD tools have you worked with?
Well, ProEngineer is the tool that Mercury Marine uses. However, Brunswick has other CAD tools that also talk to Team Center. So we use NX at different boat groups. I think SolidWorks is used at another one. And then when we work with customers, we've done CATIA as well. So we're pretty versed in a lot of the integration packages and the methodologies for getting information into, Team Center.
Right, so what Nat's referring to, in a bit of context, is Brunswick is Mercury Marine's parent company, and the other business units within Brunswick use different models.
Well, thanks, guys. Next question: how do you control changes to COTS suppliers' parts?
COTS meaning off the shelf.
Yes, right. Commercial off the shelf. Yes.
How do we handle those changes?
Right. Do you have a methodology or a process or best practices that you use to control changes that are from your COT suppliers?
Sure. Our quality department, I think, manages that for us, and so they have interaction with the suppliers through a variety of different means. And because I may not have mentioned earlier, but the changes can be initiated by anybody in the organization. It's not just engineering. Manufacturing is creating changes. In this case, the quality team or the supply chain team would be initiating a change in the system for that commercial off-the-shelf part. Or there could be situations, for example, where we dual source a part, and so as a new supplier comes online, we'd set up a Class B change for that also.
I can think of other examples when we have a part in the system and the supplier makes a change that needs to be validated in engineering. Then a current product request will go through our engineering processes, and once the current product request is being processed, then the current product engineer could initiate the change through the change board like we described during the presentation.
Great. That was a great tee-up, because the question, John, is how often does the change board meet?
When I was running my programs, we had a cadence where we met every week. So we had a scheduled time and place that didn't change. That way other managers could schedule their schedule around it, make sure that we meet consistently.
Yeah, as a follow-up to that, basically one of the neat things about the change board is the person who initiates the change, especially in the Class B side, will come to the change board meeting and present their change, basically. And then the cross-functional participants on the change board, it's program-led, but there'll be people from quality and supply chain and manufacturing and so on, and from whatever plants are affected by that particular change. And so the person initiating the change has an opportunity to say, hey, you know, this is why I think the change is important, this is how I think it's going to affect you, and so on. And then the people who are affected by it can respond, you know, during that session, rather than having emails bounce around and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's right. Having everybody there at a agreed to time and place makes routine changes routine, and the team learns how to interact. And when the controversial changes come through, you know, we're that much better prepared to handle it.
Okay. We're on a roll with change board questions from the audience. So this one is the change board authorization for funding, or do they need to go to another authorizing committee? If you can talk about the process around that.
It's a little bit of both. We will get our authorization for funding at the product approval committee level in a stage-gated process. But once that funding is approved, it's the program manager's job to manage that funding within the budget. So as the change initiator comes into the change board, as a program manager, I can approve the change and take care of the funding through my program budget. Well, I think what ends up being pretty important is, in the one example I tried to share during the presentation, is if a engineering change comes in that's going to affect the budget, maybe go outside of my budget, then I really need to be able to control that, or else I'm going to have to elevate it.
Yeah, the other thing is on a recurring product change. You know, for example, if somebody has a cost change to the product because they redesigned a part, you know, you can look at the change impact to the product beyond just the part itself. For example, from a manufacturing perspective, will the processes have to change? Or from a quality and inspection perspective, will the quality impact or the gauging have to change? And so you look at the entire life cycle of that change. It's not just, hey, did the engineer change a minor thing on the part, make it fatter, thinner, shorter, taller, whatever, but how is that going to affect the downstream users? So that's one of the reasons we have that cost collection as part of that Class B change process.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You won't catch all of those nuances unless you get the full cross-functional team together.
So it really sounds, from what you gentlemen have explained, that a big dependency here is on how much money is actually involved.
Well, what happens is, depending on the volume of parts affected by the change, for example, if it's a part that's used on 5 products, you know, and you have, let's say, a volume of 10,000 of them, that would be a different effect to the organization than if you're making a change to a part that's used like on 100 pieces, for example, on a lower volume product. So it just, you know, that's one of the reasons we look at the cost impact and the volume, because they're tied hand in hand.
Okay, great. Here's a question we may have answered, but somebody would really like to know, so let's go for it again. If you guys could articulate again how many CAD platforms are in use?
Sure. At Mercury Marine, there's just Pro Engineer, but throughout Brunswick, there's other CAD packages that we use.
Okay. And this was kind of a theme in your overall case study, but an important part of that case study, of course, is the cultural change. Would you mind talking about what are some of the things that are top of mind that folks in the audience would benefit from on how you managed and dealt with cultural change?
Sure. Basically, you know, like any large rollout, you're going to have some resistance from the user base. And so the key is to get ahead of that early. And so what we had was a change communication plan that we basically worked throughout the development of the change management system. And so at preset intervals or gates, you know, throughout that 6 months when we were working with the business, and then the 3 months that we were configuring the solution, we knew we'd be going to the businesses and basically talking with them about the change coming, understanding what systems were going to be affected and how their job might change. And so that was one of the keys for us. And then beyond just the face-to-face dialogue with the business, because we tried to go to each plant as best as we could and have several on-site sessions, We also had company-wide newsletters and different things like that, where the information would be able to be sent through. And then as we got closer to the training date, then we would start working with the employees to sign up for their training sessions and so on. And so we tried to give a nice smooth glide in as best as we could.
Thank you. John, anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think Nat covered it superbly.
I think so too. Great answer. Of the 22 days to process a change, how many days are used or needed to authorize or approve the change?
Can you repeat the question? How many days are needed to authorize the change?
Here was the question. Okay. Of the 22 days to process a change, how many days are needed or used to actually authorize or approve the change?
Probably about 5 days to actually get through the authorization process. The first, maybe the initial part of the average change is having the change board, having the communication, asking questions in the change board, and then following up with the answers to those questions is where probably most of the time is consumed.
Great. Here's a question on Team Center. Team Center seems to have two tools that can be used for something such as change management workflows or as a schedule manager. Did Merck use one of these, and if so, which one? And again, I'm more than happy to repeat that.
We use the change management piece currently, although as we're going through our 8.3 rollout, we're investigating using Schedule Manager and integrating that in with the workflow process too.
I think the Schedule Manager is going to create a lot of opportunities for program managers to have visibility to all the details of the status of all these various parts. Where are they in their sign-off processes? It was very, very helpful.
Okay. What ERP systems do you use, and does your Team Center implementation integrate with it?
Yeah, this is a pretty popular question. We get a lot. We're kind of halfway through our ERP transition project. We are still partially on our legacy mainframe environment, and then we are also in Oracle. On the Oracle side, we've stood up the iSupplier portion, a lot of the procure to pay, HR, and a lot of the finance pieces of the system. The next piece we were about to start is the manufacturing piece. And so we'll be moving the manufacturing bills of material into Team Center manufacturing, with then that blowing through into the Oracle manufacturing side.
Okay. And here's another question. What was the most critical resourcing element to ensure the PLM implementation was successful?
What we did is we had a couple of Siemens consultants that worked with us in the very beginning to get the project off the ground, and then we became self-sustaining after that. And so it was very helpful to have those couple of people on site because it's invaluable to get have experience working with the system as you're working forward. That's one reason that we've offered the PLM services to outside companies, because through the last 7 years we've gained a lot of that experience that can help jumpstart other companies.
Okay. And again, if we haven't mentioned this, one of our attendees would like to know, what version of Team Center are you using?
We're on Team Center Unified 2007. I don't recall the exact version. I think it's MP5.
Okay.
115? Okay.
Anybody else wanted to validate that?
115, and we're in the process of working on our A3 upgrade.
Okay. Great. Is all the change materials, parts, and bill of materials managed inside Team Center, and is that prepared ahead of pushing change approval and sign-off?
Generally speaking, part of the change authorization is the change board telling somebody you can go ahead and do the work. And so for example, there might be an investigation up front where the person working on the proposed change would come to the board and say, hey, I think this makes sense. But we don't let them do a lot of design work per se until that change authorization has been approved, because there could be cross-functional impacts that the person considering the change hadn't thought through. And so before a lot of time and energy or materials is spent on working through that change, we get the change board authorization handled.
Okay. And here's a question. Are change board meetings regularly scheduled or ad hoc? I think we may have touched on this, but let's go and answer it.
They're regularly scheduled in the new product programs, and that's because in the detailed design phase, there's a lot of changes that you can count on. Every week there's going to be something that the change board needs to go through. I think it's a best practice because it's a good habit pattern to get everyone into, and you can anticipate, during that phase there will be plenty of changes to fill out the agenda.
The other thing I'll mention as a carry-on to what John had just said, the change board has the ability to reject the change back to the initiator if they don't feel enough information has been given. So if the person initiating the change doesn't do their due diligence up front, when they come to that change board meeting, the product manager could just say, I'm sorry, you haven't given me enough information to go off of. And so the person have to come back. Or sometimes, depending on what happens and the timing, the initiator may get notified ahead of time by the product manager, so that way when the change meeting comes up, they can be more efficient because that person may have come back and done their homework prior to the meeting.
Now, I was just going to say one little nuance to the change board on a new product program is that the team will have to come up with on their own is when do you initiate the change board? Because obviously during the concept phase there will be a lot of changes as the kind of the broader engineering team is coming together in its concept, and it's maybe even starting to go from the concept to the detailed design. There's still really rapid changes. If you initiate change board too soon, you will slow down the progress into detailed design. But if you initiate it too late, you may lose track of the cost or some of the cross-functional implications of a change. In other words, there won't be the communication, which is really what the change board is all about.
Yeah, and in our case, the product validation phase of a new product program is where we start transitioning from that Class A blanket change for a new product program to the more traditional Class B change for a part for an existing product. Because during that the production validation phase, we're trying to exercise the production systems at that point.
Thanks. Let's take this question, and then I'd like to get a closing round of comments before we get some final housekeeping. Can one of you gentlemen describe the differentiating factors between your engineering bill of materials and the production?
Yeah, there are some. Basically, the engineering bill is, as you described, more of an engineering view of the content. And we do have a manufacturing bill of material also. The manufacturing bill of material at this point in time, which basically includes all like the process levels per se, where the engineering level won't. That manufacturing bill of materials still in our legacy system. We haven't moved to the team-centered manufacturing mode yet, where we'll handle that there and then push it to Oracle ERP going forward.
Okay. John, any closing comments for our audience before I go back to Ken for a second?
No, I just want to thank everybody for their time and attention, and like I said before, I hope this has been a good use of your time and maybe encourage you to take some next steps in your PLM implementation. It's been a great benefit for Mercury Marine, especially in this downturn. We've been able to maintain our product development cadence despite working with fewer resources, and a lot of it is due to the good work of our PLM team. We really appreciate it and hope you can enjoy the same success.
Well, thank you. Ken, as our moderator and expert, any closing comments from you before I give folks some final details?
Well, Mike, I learned a lot from both Ned and from John as well, because it makes sense that when good times are rolling, you acquire companies and you bring on a lot of different software packages, and before you know it, you ended up with multiple data management systems. So when times are tough, or when you are forced to rethink about your budgets and operation margins, then it is also an opportunity to take a look at how you want to streamline your processes and consolidate your data management system, which is exactly what Mercury Marine did. So I want to thank John and Ned, both of whom they carried the show essentially. So my heartfelt thanks to them. And to you too, Mike.
Well, and to all of you, and thank you in the audience for your time. We know how precious and valuable it is, particularly today with so many things going on. It really means a lot to us that you voted with your time to spend an hour with us. You are going to receive a short survey in just a moment. We'd love to get your feedback and let us know how today's webinar met your expectations. And those questions that we couldn't answer on air, and we're just thrilled that there there were so many questions. We apologize we couldn't get to all of them. But as I said at the top of the webinar, you will be able to expect either from Siemens or Mercury Marine, a subject matter expert, to get back and respond to your questions in the next few days. And again, a copy of today's recorded webcast will be made available along with some of the additional information that John and Nat and Ken spoke about. You'll be receiving that in an email with a link to access this recording early next week. Again, I'd also like to express my appreciation to John Bayless and Nat Workman for their tireless effort. We know they have a day job that goes beyond doing webinars, and we really thank both you guys. You did a terrific job. And, of course, to you, Ken, as our moderator, and as our sponsor, Siemens and Desktop Engineering, for making today possible. Again, as one of your hosts, this is Mike Agron saying thank you. Have a great rest of the week. We hope you'll join us for future webinars featuring this exciting solution. And bye for now.